There is a kind of kindness that isn't love. It is camouflage. You've lived long enough inside it to know the ache. When every gesture, every offer of help, every late-night answer to a desperate call comes not only from care, but from an unspoken bargain. The bargain is simple and merciless. If I am needed, I won't be abandoned. What the world applauds as compassion often began as a child's survival tactic. What looks like empathy is sometimes only vigilance disguised as generosity. And if you feel that tension inside, you are not alone. You are not broken. You are carrying an ancient contract signed long before you knew you were writing it. Pause here with me. Notice your own body as you listen. The way your shoulders may lift at the idea of saying no. The way your breath may shorten when you think about refusing someone's need. This is not weakness. It is the nervous system remembering an early environment where love was conditional. You learned that safety came through usefulness. To belong, you performed. To avoid being forgotten, you anticipated. You turned your heart into a radar, finely tuned to pick up every flicker of someone else's mood. That is not a gift bestowed by grace. It is an adaptation born from fear. And yet, the story gets praised. Society tells you, you are selfless, you are good, you are the one who always shows up. But deep down, you sense the cost. Because kindness given under duress is not connection, it is pleading. And to live in that posture is to live in exile from your own center. Carl Jung taught that the unconscious holds our earliest complexes, autonomous knots of memory, emotion, and archetype that act through us even when we swear we are free. This need to be needed is not a virtue you consciously chose. It is a possession, a binding. And it is time to walk into the shadows to see where it began. Imagine the child you once were, small and instinctively certain that love should be unconditional. But in your home, perhaps it was not. Perhaps approval came only when you performed, when you smiled, when you served, when you made yourself useful. The little one inside you made a vow. If I can be indispensable, I will not be left. That vow grew into a mask, beautiful, generous, tireless. But beneath it beats a nervous system always scanning for the next demand. This is the moment where I ask you to walk with me, not into shame, not into blame, but into clarity. To see that what you call empathy may actually be a cry for safety. To see that what you call compassion may be the echo of a forgotten child who feared invisibility more than exhaustion. You are not at fault for this inheritance, but if you keep mistaking self-sacrifice for love, the cost will be your own wholeness. So take a breath, feel the weight of that hidden contract, and let yourself wonder, what if being loved did not require being useful? What if connection did not demand exhaustion? These questions are not small. They are the first cracks in the old bargain. They are the doorway through which you will step into the deeper terrain of healing. Before we go further, let me gently remind you, if you are watching this on Carl Jung Stories Unveiled, pause for a moment and let me know in the comments where you are tuning in from and what time it is for you right now. Your presence matters, and if you find value here, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that may reflect your own hidden journey back to self. Now, let us return to the thread of the story. You began life carrying the ache of conditional love, and from that ache, you crafted an identity. The one who helps, who notices, who never stops giving. This identity served you once. It kept you tethered to others. It shielded you from the terror of abandonment. But as you grew, it also became a cage. The mask that once protected you now suffocates you. And the paradox is this: the more you try to hold on by being needed, the less you are truly seen. Because when you bend endlessly to the contours of others, when you shapeshift to match every demand, your own essence fades. You become invisible not because no one looks, but because you no longer stand still enough to be recognized. That is why the hidden contract cannot remain unchallenged. If it does, you will spend your life as a shadow saint, healing others while quietly withering inside, waiting for someone to notice the sacrifice that was never meant to be eternal. The tragedy is not only that you give too much, but that you give without being able to receive. And this cycle, left unexamined, repeats until the body itself collapses under the weight. But here is the seed of hope. The very ache that drives you is also the clue that can free you. Your exhaustion, your resentment, your longing, these are not failures. They are signals. They whisper that your empathy, in its compulsive form, is not compassion, but adaptation. And what has been adapted can be unlearned. What was born in survival can be transformed into choice. We have only opened the door. In the next step, we will walk deeper into the origin of this wound, to see how early instability forged the pattern, how the empath became the fixer, and how the archetype of the wounded healer took root in your very bones. But first, let the truth settle. What you called kindness may have been camouflage. What you called love may have been survival. And admitting that is not betrayal. It is the beginning of coming home. You were not born with the compulsion to scan every room for need. You were shaped by an environment that taught you early on that love could vanish, that attention could evaporate, that safety depended on your ability to anticipate others. This is where the empath's story of survival truly begins, inside the nervous system of a child who discovered that being pleasing was the price of staying close. Picture that small child again. Perhaps the smile had to come quickly, even when sadness was heavy. Perhaps the chores or responsibilities were carried long before the body was ready. Perhaps the parents' moods were so unpredictable that vigilance became second nature. In such a world, you could not relax. You could not risk being idle. You trained your senses like a tuning fork, vibrating to every emotional shift in the room. What others mistook for a natural gift of sensitivity was in fact the labor of survival. This is the root of what Jung would call a complex, an autonomous knot in the psyche that binds memory, emotion, and archetype into a pattern that lives through you. The need to be needed complex forms when the child internalizes the belief: if I heal, I belong. If I fix, I am safe. This knot tightens with every reinforcement until the adult cannot separate true compassion from the compulsion to prove worth. And so the archetype of the wounded healer is born. On the surface, this figure appears noble, the one who cares, who carries, who mends. But beneath that nobility lies exhaustion. The wounded healer heals others but bleeds quietly in the process. The empath becomes indispensable in families, workplaces, relationships. They are the one who remembers every birthday, who rushes in at every crisis, who never says no. Yet they are rarely met in equal measure. Why? Because the role itself forbids it. If your worth depends on being the helper, then to be helped feels like danger. To rest feels like guilt. To say no feels like abandonment will follow. The very acts that could nourish you, receiving, resting, asking, are coded as threats in your nervous system. So you double down on service, and the more you serve, the more invisible you become. Consider how the wounded healer pattern plays out in relationships. You are drawn to the unstable, the chaotic, the broken. You feel alive in their crises because it gives you a script you know by heart. You anticipate, you soothe, you mend. But notice, in such bonds, your own needs vanish. You confuse being indispensable with being loved. The magnetism you feel is not destiny. It is repetition. The psyche returns again and again to the scene of the original wound, hoping this time to rewrite the ending. But without awareness, the ending is always the same. Depletion, invisibility, quiet grief. Let us step for a moment into image, because images often reveal what words alone cannot. Imagine a healer walking through a crowded marketplace. People pull at her sleeves, calling for her hands, her remedies, her attention. She moves from one to the next, pouring herself into each wound, each broken vessel. By nightfall, she is empty, yet she smiles. She tells herself this is love. But as the crowd disperses, she realizes no one looked back to see her face. She has become a shadow, a ghost whose worth existed only in others' need. This image is not fiction. It is the psychic photograph many empaths carry unconsciously. And it is why the wounded healer archetype, though noble in myth, can be perilous in life if the wound remains unintegrated. Healing becomes a way to earn existence. Generosity becomes a contract signed in blood. And the empath, while praised, is slowly erased. Here we must pause and say clearly, this is not your fault. It is not weakness, nor is it selfishness to name it. It is inheritance. It is the nervous system adapting to an unreliable environment. And yet, while not your fault, it is now your responsibility if you wish to live whole. Because if you do not face the wound, you will keep mistaking compulsion for compassion, and you will keep bleeding quietly in the name of love. Jungian psychology offers language for this descent. Individuation, the sacred task of becoming who you truly are, cannot begin until the masks are named. The mask of the helper, the savior, the tireless one must be seen for what it is, an adaptation, not an essence. Only then can you separate what is given freely from what is given in fear. So let us return to your own body, because the body always remembers. Notice the fatigue behind your eyes when you say yes too quickly. Notice the tightness in your throat when you long to say no but swallow the word. Notice the ache in your stomach when you rest, as if guilt itself were lodged inside. These are not random discomforts. They are the somatic echoes of the contract you signed long ago. The contract that said, to exist, I must serve. But a contract written in childhood can be rewritten in adulthood. And though the pen feels heavy, though your hand may shake, you are the only one who can sign a new agreement. It begins not with grand gestures, but with awareness. The moment you see that your giving is tangled with fear, you have already loosened the knot. The moment you admit that your healing of others is also a plea to be kept, you have already begun the work of unbinding. As we close this stage of the journey, hold this truth. The wounded healer archetype is not your destiny. It is a doorway. If you walk through without awareness, you will repeat the pattern until it consumes you. But if you walk through with consciousness, you can reclaim the wound as teacher rather than tyrant. You can carry healing energy without bleeding out. You can be compassionate without being consumed. This is the pivot point. In the next movement, we will descend into dream and shadow, where the unconscious speaks in images more honest than arguments. There, we will meet the symbols that reveal what words often deny: the resentment, the longing, the rage beneath the mask. But before we step into that forest of symbols, Breathe deeply and remind yourself, what feels like compulsion today can become choice tomorrow. And choice is the first sign of sovereignty. Arguments can lie, dreams do not. When the conscious mind insists that your kindness is pure, the unconscious slips images into your sleep that tell a different story. A woman walking through the desert, giving her blood and breath until she collapses unseen. A man running through endless rooms, each filled with people begging for help, until he sits down and hears a whisper from behind a hidden door. These are not random fictions. They are the psyche staging its truth. They are the mirror the conscious mind avoids. Dreams reveal what the daylight persona conceals. Jung called dreams the royal road to the unconscious, because within them we encounter not only memory, but archetype, those timeless patterns of human experience. For the empath bound by trauma, the dream often carries images of depletion, wells that run dry, houses that collapse, animals starving while the dreamer frantically feeds them. These are symbolic X-rays, showing the cost of a life lived as if usefulness were the ticket to existence. But it is not only depletion we see. In other dreams, when the old contract begins to loosen, different images arrive. Pools of still water, wolves and lions roaming free, a forest with no demands. These are the symbols of instinct returning, the psyche's way of saying, you are more than the servant. You are an animal among animals, a being among beings. The unconscious rejoices when you step back from compulsion, but it will not let you escape without facing what you have buried, and so we turn toward the shadow. Not shadow as evil, but as everything you were taught not to be. For the empath, this shadow often contains anger, desire, ambition, selfishness, sexuality, qualities disowned in order to keep the mask of endless kindness intact. You learn to exile them, to push them into the basement of the psyche. But what is repressed never disappears. It returns through tone, exhaustion, resentment, even illness. The shadow leaks until it is faced. Consider the archetype of the mother. In her distorted form, she gives endlessly, forgets to eat, never rests, imagines herself noble in sacrifice. But the true mother archetype knows cycles. She gives milk only after she has eaten. She nourishes, but she also retreats to replenish. The empath who lives in the distorted mother loses the rhythm of give and receive and becomes a martyr. Integration requires reclaiming the true mother, one who knows that boundaries are not cruelty, but ecology. Or take the archetype of the lover. In the trauma-bonded empath, the lover confuses fusion with intimacy. To give without limits feels like devotion, but it is really obliteration. The true lover, however, knows self-possession. They say, I bring all of me to the table, not to be consumed, but to be met. Until you embody this, you will confuse obligation with love, and in doing so, betray your own heart. And then, there is the archetype of the warrior. This image is not about aggression, it is about sacred protection, the spine that stays straight when guilt tempts you to bend, the shield that guards your own life force. When the empath invokes the warrior, they stop leaking energy through every plea for help. They remember that their existence is sacred, not negotiable. Without the warrior, boundaries collapse. With the warrior, compassion flows without depletion. Notice the rhythm of these archetypes. Mother, lover, warrior. They are not enemies of empathy, but its allies, correcting its distortions. Without them, empathy becomes martyrdom. With them, empathy becomes resonance. The work of integration is not to abandon care, but to tether it to strength, to clarity, to balance. But before we romanticize this, remember, the descent into shadow is frightening. To admit you are angry beneath your kindness feels like betrayal. To admit you long to be seen, not for what you do but for who you are, feels shameful. And yet, those truths are holy. They are the threshold between the adapted self and the authentic self. Without grieving the unmet child within, without honoring the rage of invisibility, no true wholeness is possible. Pause with me here. Notice your throat. Does it tighten at the thought of saying, "I want," or "I am angry"? Notice your chest. Does it constrict when you imagine being unnecessary? These somatic cues are not minor. They are the very places the old contract lives. And to feel them without running is to begin unbinding. The shadow also shows itself in daily life. It appears as resentment brewing in silence, as passive-aggressive words, as relationships where you give and give but never receive. It arrives in bitterness that whispers, "One day, someone will notice all I've done." But this fantasy is not based in reality. It is the child's hope that the parent will finally turn and say, "I see you." Until you grieve that no one came, you will keep waiting in adulthood for a recognition that never arrives. So we return again to the archetypal journey. Myths remind us that descent always precedes rebirth. Inanna, the Sumerian goddess, descended into the underworld to face her shadow sister. She was stripped of her garments, humiliated, emptied, and killed before being reborn. The empath must undergo the same symbolic descent, stripped of roles, masks, compulsions. Only by bowing before the shadow, the rage, the longing, the unmet need, can you emerge luminous. Not perfect, but whole. Not brittle light, but rooted radiance. And what of relationships? Projection is the stage where shadow is most obvious. The empath often projects their own abandoned child onto others. The wounded boy, the fragile girl, the unstable partner. You rush to save them, believing you are noble. But in truth, you are trying to save yourself through the mirror of another. Projection feels like love, but it is a distortion. The task is to withdraw it, to look into the eyes of the one you are trying to rescue and whisper inwardly, "This is not mine." Only then can you meet the emptiness that follows. The emptiness where your old identity as rescuer once lived. That emptiness is not a void. It is a womb. From this womb, individuation begins. The self, the deep center Jung described, waits beneath the rubble of adaptation. It whispers not, "Be useful," but "Be real." It does not need you to heal the world. It needs you to be whole. And as you dare to integrate shadow and withdraw projections, you discover that true intimacy, true compassion, is only possible when you stop confusing your survival strategy with your essence. As we close this descent into dream, shadow, and archetype, remember, the unconscious does not lie. When your outer life repeats the same draining patterns, it is not misfortune. It is a mirror. When your body trembles at saying no, it is not weakness. It is memory. When your dreams show you depletion, it is not prophecy. It is truth. And facing these reflections is not cruelty. It is liberation. In the next stage of our journey, we will walk into individuation itself, the sacred process of separating compassion from compulsion, of learning to say no without terror, of discovering that sovereignty is not coldness, but clarity. But for now, let the shadow rest beside you. Do not banish it. Do not deny it. Bow to it and know that within its darkness lies the seed of your true light. You do not become cold. you become clear. That is the heart of individuation for the empath. To separate compassion from compulsion is not to stop caring. It is to stop leaking your life force into every wound you encounter. This is the turning point in the journey. The movement from being defined by others' needs to being anchored in your own being. Individuation, in Jung's language, is the sacred process of becoming who you truly are, distinct from the roles you inherited and the masks you wore. For the empath, individuation means no longer confusing survival strategies with identity. It means remembering that the self, the deep center of the psyche, is not discovered through endless giving, but through solitude, reflection, and courage to hold boundaries. Boundaries, of course, feel like betrayal when you first set them. Your entire nervous system trembles as you whisper the word no. Your throat shakes. Your stomach knots. Somewhere inside, the child still fears annihilation. If I am not useful, I will be punished. If I say no, I will be abandoned. This is why individuation is not merely an intellectual insight, but a somatic threshold. To hold your ground when every fiber of your body screams bend is to rewrite the old contract at the cellular level. Think of it this way. When you first set boundaries, guilt arrives like a ghost. It whispers, "You are selfish, you are cruel, you are ungrateful." But guilt is not proof of wrongdoing. It is proof of conditioning. You are not betraying anyone. You are betraying the old lie that worth equals usefulness. And each time you sit in the tremble of guilt without collapsing, you strengthen the new root of sovereignty. Let's use image again, because images carry what words struggle to hold. Picture a tree in storm winds. For years, you were taught to bend with every gust, to twist yourself into whatever shape would keep you from breaking. But now you are learning to let your roots sink deeper, so you sway rather than snap. You may still move, you may still respond, but you no longer dissolve. That is individuation, learning to stand in your own center while still touching the world. Jung reminds us that individuation is not isolation. It is not withdrawal from love. On the contrary, it is the only path to authentic love, because only a whole person can truly meet another whole person. When your giving arises from compulsion, it is always mixed with a hidden plea. Please keep me. But when it arises from wholeness, it is free, an offering, not a bargain. So the task before you is this: to disentangle your empathy from your need, to ask, with trembling honesty, who am I if I am not needed? This question is terrifying because the old answer kept you safe. But when you let yourself sit inside the silence, another voice eventually arrives. It is not frantic, not begging. It simply says, "You are." Projection dissolves here as well. The empath who rescues others often discovers that what they wanted to save was their own inner child. In individuation, you reclaim that child directly, without projecting it onto every broken soul you meet. You walk into the forest of your unconscious, where that child waits, tired of pleasing, tired of serving, longing to be seen by you. When you kneel and embrace that child, something irreversible happens. You stop outsourcing your care. You stop using others as mirrors. You become your own witness. The work is subtle and relentless. It means saying no when every instinct tells you to rescue. It means letting someone be disappointed in you, and discovering their disappointment does not kill you. It means resting without apology, receiving without explanation, feeling without fixing. Each small act of resistance to the old contract is a revolution, and revolutions are rarely welcomed by the world. When you begin to change, those who benefited from your endless giving may protest. Families may accuse you of being selfish. Partners may sulk or rage. Friends may drift away. They were attached to the role you played, not to your true self. Do not mistake their protest for evidence that you are wrong. It is evidence that you are no longer willing to bleed for approval. This is where the archetype of the warrior becomes essential. The warrior does not seek conflict, but protects what is sacred. And what could be more sacred than your own life force, your own boundaries, your own becoming? The warrior gives you a spine when guilt tries to fold you in half. It allows you to stand without apology, to protect the space where your authentic self can breathe. But remember, individuation is not just defense, it is also joy. When you reclaim the energy once spent on compulsive caretaking, you discover new wells inside you: creativity, play, sensuality, rest. These are not luxuries. They are signs that you are alive again. The empath who heals learns to paint, to sing, to walk slowly, to dance without reason. In these moments, empathy becomes resonance, no longer bound to the chains of fear. Let us pause. Notice your breath. Let it be full, not shallow. Feel your chest expand, your body allowed to take up space. This is what individuation tastes like. Not performance, not exhaustion, but presence. When you begin to embody this, even in brief moments, you are already shifting the ground beneath your life. The movement from compulsion to compassion is the axis of your transformation. It is the line that divides the old contract from the new. And once you step across, there is no going back. Not because the temptation will disappear, but because you will recognize the cost too clearly to pay it again. As we close this section, carry these truths. Individuation is not selfishness. Boundaries are not cruelty. Saying no is not abandonment. Each is an act of fidelity to the self that has waited patiently beneath the rubble of adaptation. And when you honor that self, you do not love less. You love cleanly, clearly, without bargain. In the next stage, we will walk into embodiment and collective healing, the work of breaking generational patterns, of reclaiming the body as sanctuary, of living not just as a healed empath, but as a sovereign being whose presence itself transforms systems. But before that, let the silence hold you. Let the word no echo in your chest until it feels less like fear and more like freedom. Transformation does not remain an idea. It must take root in the body. All the insight in the world will dissolve unless it is embodied. For the empath, this is perhaps the hardest stage, learning to inhabit your own skin without apology, to let your muscles relax without guilt, to feel desire without shame, to receive without explanation. The work of embodiment is the work of homecoming. Think of where the contract lives in you. Shoulders that cannot relax because they are braced for duty. A throat that trembles when you try to say no. A stomach that knots when you rest instead of rushing to serve. These are not random tensions. They are the map of your old vow. If I am useful, I am safe. To rewrite the vow is not only to think differently, it is to breathe differently, to move differently, to inhabit time differently. Embodiment is also about grief. You cannot bypass the sorrow of the child who was never allowed to simply exist. The tears that come are not weakness. They are reclamation. They are the body releasing the weight of invisibility. Jung called this the negredo, the blackening, the decomposition of the false self before the gold emerges. In embodiment, the old mask crumbles not through willpower, but through the slow, holy permission to rest, to stop performing. And in that rest, something remarkable happens. The world begins to feel quieter, not because it has changed, but because you have. Rooms no longer scream for your attention. Conversations no longer erase your voice. You no longer scan for need like a radar always on. This is the nervous system relearning safety. This is what it means to no longer live in bondage to childhood roles. But your healing is never only your own. Empathic wounds are often ancestral. You inherited more than hair color and posture. You inherited the patterns of self-erasure, of codependency, of martyrdom. Generations survived by disappearing, by silencing their needs, by serving to the point of collapse. When you reclaim yourself, you disrupt that lineage. You become the one who says, "It ends here." Not only for me, but for those who came before and those who will come after. This is why Jung spoke of individuation not just as personal healing, but as collective alchemy. When one person becomes whole, the system around them trembles. Families resist, lovers protest, cultures push back. But slowly, the pattern shifts. You are not simply healing yourself. You are altering the myth you inherited. You are teaching future generations that love does not demand disappearance. Picture again the tree standing on the hill, heavy with fruit, stripped by everyone until its branches break. That was the old empath, praised but dying. Yet when a broken branch touched the soil, a new tree grew, smaller, less visited, but deeply rooted. It did not feed everyone, but it endured the storm. This image is the collective promise. When you stop existing for others alone, you grow a root system strong enough to survive. You do not disappear, you endure. And here is the paradox. The less you need to be needed, the more powerful your presence becomes. People can feel when your love is free, not entangled. They can feel when your compassion comes from overflow, not deficit. You stop being a ghost in service and become a sovereign presence. And sovereignty is not domination. It is clarity, grace, boundaries made of velvet and steel. The final test of embodiment is consistency. There will be days you forget, days you fall back into old roles, days when guilt arrives dressed as duty. Do not shame yourself. Simply notice. Smile at the visitor. Say, "I see you, but I no longer live from that place." Return to breath. Return to stillness. Return to truth. This is how new patterns solidify, not through perfection, but through repetition. And slowly, your dreams change too. No longer the frantic chase, the endless rooms, the depletion. Instead, rivers appear, circles of reunion, wild animals resting beside you, your child self laughing in the sun. These are not fantasies. They are thresholds. They are the unconscious celebrating your return. What happens next is intimacy, first with yourself, then with others. You begin to savor solitude, no longer fearing it as abandonment. You trust your own company. You no longer chase affirmation through service. You no longer settle for being needed instead of being seen. You choose relationships not by who drains you, but by who meets you. And when you look in the mirror, you see not the helper, not the savior, but the eternal soul you have always been. This is wholeness, not sainthood, not perfection, but the integration of light and shadow, giver and receiver, strength and softness. You can say yes, and you can say no. You can care, and you can rest. You can give, and you can receive. Wholeness is not brittle light, but rooted radiance. So the empath's journey circles back to the beginning. What once was camouflage, kindness as survival, has become clarity. What once was compulsion, Healing others while bleeding has become choice. And the old story, the one that said you must earn love by disappearing, no longer holds you. The old contract, be needed or be nothing, is finished. The new one is simple. I exist. I matter. I choose when to give. These words may feel fragile in your mouth at first, but they are seeds. Speak them anyway. Whisper them when guilt presses in. Write them in your journal. Let them echo in your body until they feel like home. Name the old story clearly so it cannot return unnoticed. It said, I must earn love. I must serve to belong. I must heal to be worthy. Let its death be pronounced. That story is over. Then plant the new vows. I am loved. I am whole. I choose. Picture yourself standing before a mirror. Not the mirror that once bent to reflect everyone else, but a mirror steady, clear, unyielding. You look into your own eyes and, perhaps for the first time, say, I see you. I will not abandon you again. This is the reversal of the opening wound. You are no longer the child begging for recognition. You are the adult granting it. And yet, this ending is not only personal. It ripples outward. When you stop abandoning yourself, you model a new possibility. Others may resist, but some will be inspired. They will see your clarity, your peace, and they will ask, how did you do it? You will answer, not with arrogance, but with quiet truth. I stopped betraying myself. This is the revolution hidden in the empath's wound. To transform need into sovereignty is not only to heal your life, it is to rewrite ancestral patterns of silence and martyrdom. It is to tell future generations, love is not something you must earn. It is what you are. So let today carry one boundary you keep. Just one. It might be saying no to an unnecessary favor. It might be resting without apology. It might be receiving a compliment without deflection. Whatever it is, let it stand as proof. You are no longer bound to the old contract. And may your body feel the relief of being yours again. May your breath deepen, your shoulders soften, your stomach unclench. May you taste the sacred joy of being unnecessary, of existing without transaction. This is not selfishness. This is the truth of being. Welcome home. You are no longer the empath who disappears into others. You are the soul who has emerged, whole, alive, sovereign. And from this wholeness, your empathy is no longer camouflage or currency. It is resonance, a song of the soul, offered not in desperation, but in joy.